Hello and welcome back to our book study on Dallas Willard's book, Hearing God. We continue today looking at chapter 2. Remember that our book study has two parts for each chapter. The first is to summarize the chapter, and the second is then to look at the questions at the end of each chapter. We'll be referencing during that time how our individual group answered those questions, as well as to be able to post them so that you as your small group will be able to look at them as well. The second chapter of Dallas Willard's book is titled Guidelines for Hearing from God. And I confess when I hear this title, my mind immediately jumps to the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, where they're talking about the Pirates Code, and somebody says they're more like guidelines anyway. And I think that's kind of what he's emphasizing here. These aren't hard and fast rules, but they're an understanding of our conversation and relationship with God. He begins the chapter looking at the movie The Stepford Wives as an example. He uses it to point out that within a dictatorial relationship, within statesman, a place where there is no individualism, where there is no choice, there is in fact no love. And Dallas Willard uses this to highlight the point that our relationship with God is not one with God as a taskmaster or a dictator in our lives, but one where God himself, the creator of the universe, is seeking relationship with us. And we need to be aware of that. So guideline 1 is that we are to love God with all our being. And this is an important point, because when you love someone, you seek to do good for them. You seek to understand them. You seek to know them. Consequently, we need to know that about God speaking to us. That when God tries to speak to us, it's for our benefit. Consequently, when we are speaking to God, asking for him to speak to us, seeking his guidance, seeking his understanding, we need to be doing it with an understanding of what is best for us and what is best for those around us, because that is the heart of God. God is not a taskmaster, rather someone who loves. And that's what we need to understand. The second guideline is that mere humans can talk with God. And this is an important point, because in the church, we venerate the saints. We lift them up as examples of Christianity. But if we view those saints as something other, something so great for their achievements, we forget that we can be like them. And if we view them as something so great and so magnificent, we forget that we are even called to be more than we are. That there is a journey to our relationship with God. So consequently, we need to remember that we can speak with God. And there's a bit of a difficulty there, because we need to then believe in ourselves, have enough confidence in the way God sees us as special and beautiful and amazing. But at the same time, we need to have humility in understanding what we are in relationship to God, which is his created being. We are his children, and we can't think of ourselves as more than that. So there is a relationship there that is a balance that is perhaps hard to strike. The next thing we need to understand is that, again, we can hear from God. And so how can we? We need to actually expect that we can hear from God, to even be willing to listen. He tells us one of the ways that we can hear from God in an ancient tradition called Lectio Divina, and it's reading ourselves into a story. He gives the story example of Elijah just after the miracle on Mount Carmel, and in which he hears from the Queen Jezebel, that she wants to kill him. He falls into a place of despondency, despair, and he runs away. He needs to hear from God, and he ultimately does. But we're given the exercise of stepping into Elijah's shoes in this moment and asked, what would it be like to hear from God? How would we hear from God? What would Elijah be feeling in this moment? Invited to feel that moment for ourselves, and consequently feel God relieving our despair, feeling God speaking into our lives in that moment. He walks us through each of these things to reflect on it, to pray regarding it, and to contemplate and to rest in God's response to us. Now, this is quite an ancient tradition, but it is one way in which we can hear the Holy Spirit touch and speak into our lives. The next point or guideline that Dallas Willard states in this chapter, the second chapter, is hearing God doesn't make us righteous. And this is an ancient problem, where if God does speak to you, the resulting question is, why are you so special? Well, I am and I'm not. I am because God says I am. But God also says you are. So why have I been chosen to hear God's voice? Perhaps it's because, not to be rude, you might not be listening. Or perhaps it's because I have a skill set or a specific something that God's asking me to do. That's why he's speaking to me. If I want one of my daughters to do something, I speak to them, not to someone else. So again, that might be the answer as to why we are not righteous simply because God speaks to us. But God is speaking to us because he loves us. So that is the summary of this second chapter. You're invited to click over and to look at the questions and to how our group tackled them. We invite you to look at the questions and to discuss them with your friends or family or those you might be doing this study with. Because God is trying to speak to you.